Sarah, let's go back to December 22nd, 1944. Bastogne, Belgium. It's freezing cold, misty morning during the Battle of the Bulge.
And the 101st Airborne Division is completely surrounded there, right?
Completely. About 12,000 Americans, mostly paratroopers, encircled by 5 German Panzer divisions for 3 days. They're low on ammo, food, medical supplies. It's desperate.
A truly dire situation.
And then, out of the mist, 4 German soldiers emerge, waving white flags. They're carrying a briefcase.
They're coming to offer terms of surrender.
Exactly. An honorable way out of an impossible situation. But what the Germans didn't understand, what no conventional army could really grasp, was the fundamental culture of the American paratrooper.
This wasn't just about tactics or numbers.
Not at all. This moment would reveal a cultural divide so deep, it defined what made these paratroopers different. The Germans expected a rational military decision. They were about to get something else entirely.
So, set the larger stage. How did the 101st end up surrounded in Bastogne?
It all started on December 16, 1944. Hitler launched his last major offensive in the West, the Battle of the Bulge, smashing through the Ardennes forest.
Trying to split the Allied armies and capture the port of Antwerp.
It was a massive gamble, and a key objective in the southern part of that push was the small Belgian town of Bastogne.
Why was Bastogne so important?
It was a critical crossroads. 7 major roads converged there. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled movement for supplies, reinforcements, everything in that entire sector.
So the Germans had to take it.
General von Luttwitz and his 47th Panzer Corps were tasked specifically with capturing Bastogne. He knew it was the absolute key to the southern thrust of the offensive.
And who was defending Bastogne? Just the 101st?
It was an improvised defense. The 101st Airborne, veterans of Normandy and Market Garden, were actually resting in France when the Bulge began.
They were the strategic reserve, essentially.
Eisenhower's only reserve. The order came on December 17th. Get to Bastogne now. They were trucked 107 miles in open vehicles, in freezing rain and snow, without proper winter gear.
That sounds miserable.
It was. Alongside them was Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, which had been fighting a delaying action, buying just enough time for the paratroopers to arrive.
It was a race against time.
Literally hours. The first paratroopers rolled into Bastogne just 4 hours before the Germans would have taken it unopposed. And commanding the 101st wasn't their usual general, Maxwell Taylor, but his deputy, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, an artillery officer, not an airborne guy originally.
Right. Respected, competent, unflappable, but not a charismatic figure. He turned out to be exactly the right man for the moment.
McAuliffe quickly organized a defensive perimeter around the town, using every unit he had. The parachute regiments, the glider infantry, engineers, even headquarters staff.
They knew they were going to be surrounded.
Absolutely. By December 20th, the ring was closed. The Germans, with elements of 5 divisions, including Panzer Lehr and the 2nd Panzer, outnumbered the Americans by about 5-1.
Overwhelming advantages in tanks and artillery for the Germans.
And the Americans were critically short of everything, especially ammunition and medical supplies. Plus, the weather was atrocious. Heavy fog and snow grounded the Allied air forces. No resupply, no air support.
By any conventional military logic, the situation was hopeless.
Completely hopeless. Any traditional army facing those odds would be preparing for the inevitable surrender or annihilation. But these weren't traditional soldiers.
This is where the paratrooper culture comes in, isn't it?
Exactly. These were all volunteers. They had endured the toughest training in the U.S. military, designed specifically to weed out anyone who lacked mental toughness.
They were conditioned to operate under extreme stress.
More than that, they were expected to jump behind enemy lines, be surrounded, be outnumbered, and fight without support. That was their job description.
Their entire identity was built around doing the impossible.
Their creed literally stated, "I never surrender, though I be the last." That wasn't just a slogan, it was doctrine. If paratroopers surrendered when surrounded, the entire concept of airborne operations would collapse.
So, for the men of the 101st, being encircled at Bastogne wasn't a unique crisis?
It was just another day at the office. A tough day, sure, but fundamentally what they had signed up for. The German idea of an honorable surrender simply didn't exist in their vocabulary.
So, back to the morning of December 22nd. The 4 German soldiers approached the American lines under white flags.
Carrying the surrender ultimatum from General von Lüttwitz.
Yes, they're blindfolded and taken to a company command post. The message is read. It outlines the situation. Americans surrounded, strong German armor, no hope of relief.
The standard stuff before demanding surrender.
It offers honorable surrender to save the American troops from total annihilation. And it gives them a deadline, 2 hours.
Or else?
Or else, the full force of German artillery and heavy anti-aircraft battalions used in a ground role would annihilate them.
Strong words.
The company commander immediately calls division headquarters. The message is rushed to General McAuliffe, who was actually trying to catch a few moments of sleep.
Lieutenant Colonel Ned Moore wakes McAuliffe and tells him the Germans have sent a surrender ultimatum.
What was McAuliffe's first reaction?
His first groggy response was just one word: nuts.
Seriously?
That's the story. He then asked what the Germans actually wanted. McAuliffe explained the demand for surrender within 2 hours. McAuliffe just laughed.
Why did he find it so absurd?
Because from his perspective, they were winning. They had stopped every German attack. They were inflicting heavy casualties. The weather was predicted to clear soon, bringing resupply and air support. Patton's Third Army was known to be racing north. The surrender demand just seemed completely disconnected from reality.
But he had to send some kind of formal reply.
Right. Protocol demanded it. He sat down with his staff, trying to figure out what to write. He genuinely didn't know what to say. Then his operations officer, Lieutenant Colonel Kennard, reminded him of his initial reaction.
You said nuts.
Exactly. The staff loved it. It perfectly captured the absurdity of the situation and McAuliffe's own dry, unflappable personality. So, that's what he wrote. The official reply was just nuts.
Typed on official letterhead.
To the German commander, nuts. The American commander. Colonel Joseph Harper delivered it back to the waiting, blindfolded German officers.
What did he tell them it meant?
He told them quite plainly, it means go to hell.
This exchange highlights that cultural chasm you mentioned. Von Lüttwitz acted according to centuries of European military tradition.
Correct. Overwhelming force, hopeless situation for the defenders. Offering honourable terms was the standard, expected procedure. It was seen as rational command, saving lives when resistance was futile.
He expected the American commander to make a logical calculation based on the odds.
He completely failed to understand the American paratrooper. The 101st wasn't built on conventional military logic. It was built on the idea of a rendezvous with destiny.
An elite identity forged in brutal training.
Training designed to eliminate anyone whose instinct for self-preservation might override commitment to the mission.
They wore different uniforms, had different traditions, and saw themselves as warriors who fought where others wouldn't.
So the idea of surrendering simply because they were surrounded was alien to them.
It was antithetical to their entire reason for existing. Their job was to hold critical objectives against all odds. If they surrendered, the whole airborne concept failed. McAuliffe's nuts wasn't just a snappy comeback, it was a clear statement of their cultural reality. Surrender was not an option, period.
And then, almost immediately after the reply was sent, things began to change. The weather finally broke. On December 23rd, the skies cleared. Allied C-47 transport planes filled the air, dropping desperately needed ammunition, food, medical supplies, and winter clothing. And just as importantly, the fighter bombers could fly again. P-47 Thunderbolts started hammering the German tanks and artillery positions surrounding Bastogne. The psychological boost for the defenders was immense. They knew help was truly on the way.
Did the Germans try one last major push?
They did, on Christmas Eve. A massive assault that actually penetrated the American lines briefly before McAuliffe shifted reserves and concentrated artillery fire shattered the attack. The perimeter held.
And Patton's Third Army was closing in.
Patton had done the seemingly impossible, pivoting 3 divisions 90 degrees and driving the north through terrible winter conditions. The spearhead was the 4th Armored Division,
led by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams.
His tank battalion made the final push on December 26th. After a massive artillery barrage, his Shermans, led by a tank nicknamed Cobra King, charged through the last German-held village. At about 4:50 p.m., they linked up with engineers from the 101st. The siege was broken.
So Patton's army rescued the 101st?
And that, Sarah, is precisely the narrative the paratroopers rejected, immediately and vehemently. They didn't see it as a rescue.
Not at all. To them, being surrounded wasn't a crisis requiring rescue. It was just the operational reality of their mission. Their mission was to hold Bastogne, and they were doing it. Patton's arrival was just logistics.
Exactly. McAuliffe made this crystal clear later. He said they never asked for help, except for surgeons for the wounded. They needed resources to continue the mission, not to be saved from the mission.
It sounds like semantics, but for them it was fundamental.
It was their identity. Admitting they needed rescuing would imply they were victims, that they had failed. But they hadn't failed. They had succeeded. They held the vital crossroads against overwhelming odds exactly as ordered.
So, the famous line from Band of Brothers is true? That no member of the 101st ever admitted they needed rescuing?
It's absolutely true, and it reflects that deep, unshakable cultural difference. They were warriors who accomplished an impossible mission, not soldiers who needed saving. That distinction, forged in the crucible of Bastogne and summed up in McAuliffe's single, defiant word, became their enduring legacy.